listening to the Astrocast.
Welcome back to the Astrocast. I am your host, Rue. Today is Wednesday, December 10th, 2025. We are well into this moon. We're sitting at a 60% waning gibbous, thereabouts. Hope everybody's been doing well. Appreciate you all patiently waiting around and giving me a couple of weeks off for the holiday. I definitely took full advantage of the time away and really enjoyed myself. I got to spend a lot of time with my family. Got to spend some time with some friends as well. Got to see my football team win a very, very important game against the Rams to keep us in the playoff hunt, which made me very happy. And I guess biggest of all, I got to go up to Chicago and see Billy Corgan put on A Night of Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which was a opera that he wrote. That really was just incredible is the only word that I can use to describe it. We ended up driving from Charlotte, North Carolina, where we stay, all the way up to Chicago, Illinois, which isn't as long as a drive as I thought it would be. About a 13-hour, 14-hour drive, depending on traffic. And we did 2 days. So, you know, when I was younger, I would do a 13-hour drive in one day, no problem. In fact, I usually preferred it. Now that I'm a little bit older, though, if I'm going more than 8 hours in a day, I don't want to do it. So we stopped at hotels along the way there and back. So we took our time getting up. We spent 2 nights in Chicago. We stayed right in downtown Chicago in an area called the Loop, which was like right by the Riverwalk in the theater district. And we saw Billy Corgan at the Lyric Opera House, and he performed with a full symphony with a full chorus standing behind them, and they had 4 opera singers, you know, soprano, mezzo-soprano, etc., alto. I don't know all of them, but it was phenomenal. It really was. I think a lot of people went to the show expecting it to be a Smashing Pumpkins concert. I knew it was not going to be that because he advertised it as such. It was an opera, and he picked the songs that fit in that sense. He sang himself on 4 of them, including my favorite Smashing Pumpkins song, which is 33, and it blew me away. So me and my wife were both extremely happy with the show. It was really an incredible experience, and just one of those things I'll be able to look back on in 20 years and be like, I was at that show. We spent way too much money at the merch booth. In fact, I calculated we actually spent more at the merch booth than we did on the tickets for the show, if you can believe that. But how do you drive all the way to Chicago and not buy the hoodie that has the tour dates, if you will, on it? I just had to have it. So we both got a hoodie, and I got a new pin. If anyone knows me, I collect pins. I don't wear pins, but I collect them. Don't ask me why. I got into it a few years ago, and I'm just all about it now. But man, what a great time. Came back. We spent Thanksgiving here. We hosted Thanksgiving. Last year, we went out to dinner somewhere, and it was just the worst experience ever. So I was super happy to, you know, get my hands on a turkey and cook it, and it came out incredible. I used some Alton Brown techniques and then a couple of other techniques that I had never tried before, and it came out perfect. It was one of the most moist and delicious turkeys. I know everybody always says that, but it really was. It was like, it was perfect. So I hope you guys all had a great holiday as well. Thank you so much for waiting it out for a couple of weeks there. We stayed very busy in the Discord. It continues to bring in new members each week. It seems like we get a new person that joins in. And I just want to take a moment and welcome our new members. And that would be Randy and Ray, both joined within the last couple of weeks. Of course, James joined before that, but I think I thanked you, James, a couple weeks back. And yeah, the Discord is doing just really, really great. I'll have a little something special about that at the end of the show today. Just one of our long-term members surprised me and the rest of us with something that I think is really cool. So I'll share that with you guys a little bit later today. But a lot of news to catch up on in the astrophotography world. A lot of new products have been released. Fortunately for me, that's something that I can read up on and stay interested in, because we've had nothing but clouds in Charlotte since like 3 weeks now. I mean, I literally, the best I've done is, I think one night I was able to see Jupiter and the moon through the haziness of the clouds, and that was about it. So it's been rough here. We haven't had much luck at all. My previous neighbors moved out. We have new neighbors. I did adjust that light to not point directly into our backyard, or side yard, I should say, before they moved. So I haven't even had a chance to get out there and try to image since the new folks moved in, but I'm hoping that light won't affect me too much. The thing I'm really worried about is they have a hound dog, and he's got the loudest bark you've ever heard. It's a deep bark too. You know, one of those, woo, 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 one of those. I used to have a hound dog when I was a kid. And I'm just like, God, let that be an indoor dog. I hope he doesn't like stay out there all night, because he'll be barking at me nonstop. Then again, I usually don't hang out for hours at a time in my little observatory area. I like to get things up and running and then go inside and hang out, which is something that I would assume a lot of you probably do as well. But ultimately, I do like to, be able to sit out there and look at things, especially when I'm testing out new scopes. I like to be able to, take my time and not have to rush through things. Luckily, I was noticing that light was on the other night, and I was just checking to see what the angle was like. I think I can put up even just like a small piece of plywood or something like that, and it should block most of the light that is coming in. I figure that combined with a good long dew shield should do the trick for keeping most of the scattered light at bay. See, I wish I had more to report on in terms of actual imaging, but I just haven't really had a chance to. I will say I started on the Horsehead region. Last time I was able to image, I didn't get a ton done that night because some clouds rolled in around 2 a.m. and I haven't had a chance to pick it back up. But the thing I will be going for next is going to be the Horsehead region. So Horsehead and Flame Nebula, obviously, right there at the start of Orion's belt. And one of our members in the Discord earlier today posted that they were shooting that region with their 135 millimeter lens. I believe it's the Rokinon 135 they were using. And that is if you haven't done it, that is an excellent region to shoot with a 135, because, depending on the camera you're using, obviously, you can get pretty much all of Orion's belt, and it doesn't frame up quite as nicely, but you can do Orion, as in the Orion Nebula, as well as the Horsehead and Flame. But I don't really like that framing, because it seems like it's always all the way on the edge of the frame, and it just kind of awkwardly frames up. What I personally like to do is, if I'm going for a shot that wide, is I like to frame up the belt. So All Attack, All Nilam, and Mantaka right there, all three of them. And then in the, lower right quadrant of the photo, have the Flame and Horsehead Nebula. And there's just so much hydrogen alpha signal in that region that once you start to get up towards 8 to 10 hours, even in, Bortle 7 skies like I have, assuming you're using a light pollution filter, of course, that Ha signal just really explodes. And, if you take your time and really work the processing, like really work it, not to the point where it's overblown, obviously, and starts to get grainy, but you will find that you can get even the very faint TA signal to come out of the background in that shot relatively easily. This is definitely one where you want to separate the stars like immediately before you start the processing. I'll generally throw it in PixInsight, and then I will pull out the stars using, the star list script that I always use in PixInsight. And then I will use generalized hyperbolic stretch and then start pulling out that signal, piece by piece as I go. So if you've never done it and you have a really wide field setup like that, like a 135, that's just a really, really cool region to shoot. And people know Orion's belt. So, if you happen to share that photo with a family or friend, or, even do a print of it, like I've got a really cool print of that one that I made a few years ago. You can just tell people like that's Orion's belt right there. And that's one of the things that, lots of people can recognize in our night sky. So I mentioned new gear earlier when we were doing the intro, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see it or not, but ZWO just recently released a new full frame camera. So the ASI 4400 MC Pro is a true full frame sensor. It's based on the IMX 366 Sony sensor, of course. Similarly spec to the 2600, but a little bit better in obviously some ways. Like the resolution's 8192 by 5460. I'm trying to think how that compares to the 2600. Let me check. I'm looking over the specs of this camera, and the first thing that occurred to me is at $3,000, which is the current street price for the 4400. That's double basically what you see for the 2600 MC Pro for normal everyday pricing. That's not counting sales when you can sometimes get it for $1,250 like I did when they did the older version on sale. I don't know how well this really holds up for us, backyard astrophotographers, or even really in a home observatory setup. If you're, maybe a little bit fancier, because the thing that I immediately noticed when I went to the APS-C sensor with the 2600 MC Pro was how much more area I'm getting compared to my 294 MC Pro. I mean, it was huge as far as the region that I was able to capture. And obviously going from an APS-C sensor to a full frame sensor gives you a much wider field of view. So your 26 megapixels is what you get on your 2600 MC Pro. And resolution wise, that comes out to about 6200 by 4200 pixels rather. Whereas when you go up to the IMX 366 sensor, you go up, it stretches just along the same. It's 44 megapixels and 8200 by 5400, which is standard for full frame digital cameras. That's the same resolution really that my R5 has for all intents and purposes. It makes me really question whether this is something that makes sense to buy. The ADC is a little bit lower. You got 16 bits on the 2600 MC Pro versus 14 bit on the 4400. The pixels are a little bit bigger on the full frame, which makes sense because it's such a larger sensor using very similar technology, I would imagine, compared to the 3.76 that we see on the 2600. The cooling is the same, the buffer is the same. Unless you have like a really specific use case for why you need a full frame camera, I would have a hard time recommending this to most people because I feel like APS-C is about as wide as I would ever want to go when doing deep space photography. Because what I mean by that is I love using my Canon R5 and Canon R7 for astrophotography, and I do frequently. I will use them on dark sky trips predominantly. And even when I, go down to the observatory, I love to bring them. And, price wise, your Canon R5 can be had for about $2,500. Now, I understand that it's not a 1-for-1 with an astrophotography camera. I completely get that. And that you're not going to get cooling in the same way that you would on a deep space camera. And obviously connecting it to a telescope can be a challenge for something like an RF sensor. Maybe not connecting it to the telescope isn't an issue, but making lenses work is really what you run into an issue with because they're all focused by wire. However, I would say that the trade-offs are not anywhere near the benefits that you get from having a terrestrial camera, because let's not forget, we can use that for all sorts of other photography. Like when I was in Chicago, I brought my R7 and my kit lens with me, and I was able to get tons of really, really great shots that I just would not be able to get with my cell phone. I've got a, iPhone 14 Pro Max or whatever last year's model is, might be a 15 actually. And it's great, for what it is. It's a great camera, but it doesn't hold a candle to my R5, and it never will. And that's okay. I tell you all this to say, if you already have an APS-C sensor, I don't really see this 4400 as making a whole lot of sense to drop $3,000 on. Honestly, I would probably, before I dropped $3,000 on something like this, I would get a 2600 MC Air, which has everything built into it, and then use that extra, $1,200 to $1,500, depending on when you get it, on other astronomy gear or even other lenses if you want to, go a full frame camera route and get yourself one. And when I say R5, that's on the higher end of the spectrum for consumer photography. You don't have to spend, $2,500 to get a good full frame camera these days. You can get great full frame cameras for under $1,000 that will be infinitely more versatile than your single, deep space astrophotography camera. So it's just my 2 cents on it. Take it for what you will. I personally can't really recommend that. Like I say, if you didn't have a 2600 and you had the right setup where it made sense, keep in mind with that wide of a sensor too, things like vignetting and issues in the corners are going to be greatly magnified because it's just such a larger sensor. You also are going to have to need, 2-inch filters for sure. To make sure that you can cover that 36 by 24 sensor. You'll need the 50 millimeter filters. So there's a lot of little things to think about. So it's not really just, hey, it's full frame, bigger sensor, more light collecting. Like, yes, this is true. But there are some definite trade-offs as well. And that's just something to keep in mind. So for me, I'll be sticking with my 2600. I'm extremely happy with it. And I think if I won the lottery, maybe I could see buying a 4400 and putting it on. I don't even know what would you put something that wide on that would make sense and really sell it. You know what I mean? Because I feel like with most of our modern wide refractor telescopes, they do such a great job in framing up certain areas with not just the 2600, but even smaller sensors. Like I can take my ASCAR quintuplet refractor astrograph and hook up my 585 MC Pro, which is, a tiny little sensor, smaller than micro four thirds, and get, excellent results with it. And it frames up things like the Orion Nebula, the Horsehead and Flame, the Rosette, the Heart Nebula. It frames all of those up really well. Now, I will say the Heart Nebula in particular gets cut off a little bit with the 585. For that, you have to go to the 294 or larger to get the whole thing in. So, okay, maybe for some shots like that, or if you wanted to, I don't know, maybe get like the entire row region plus the blue Horsehead, that could make sense. Maybe if you want to do the Heart and Soul, or maybe like a giant frame of the Cygnus region. So, I mean, yeah, you could definitely get some cool shots with it. But again, when you start going that wide, I just start to say like, okay, well, why don't I just hook up an 85 millimeter lens to my Canon R5 and put that on a mount and dither it, every 3 frames and see how that comes out. And it gives me a lot more to play around with. And then obviously I have the benefits of having a terrestrial camera, which really can't be understated. It's awesome to have a real camera to be able to, practice your craft with whenever the skies are cloudy, because like for the last 3 weeks here, I haven't been able to so much as, think about looking through an eyepiece or, taking a new photograph of the Horsehead Nebula. But I've certainly picked up my new camera and taken tons of photos, and I'm very happy with how a whole lot of them came out. I can go birding with it. I got that new 85 millimeter lens. I've been having a great time with that. I actually got a new softbox recently, which is something, if you're into videography or photography, it basically is something that you can put your flash into and then better control the light in certain situations. Really, in all situations, it gives you light when there might not be some otherwise. And I've been having a ton of fun playing with that. So I really want to get better at portraits because I want to do some portrait photography of my father-in-law soon. So that's on the list of to-dos. So yeah, getting a nice full frame camera, or APS-C for that matter, like my R7, great camera. That's the one I started with. Can open up a ton of new doors for you in photography. That's before we even talk about things like Milky Way photography with a 16 millimeter lens, or maybe go with a 50 millimeter lens and point it, over the horizon while Rho is rising and get the entire, Sagittarius area and the core of the Milky Way. And there's just so much flexibility that you have with that. Or you could spend $3,000 and have a, twice as wide field of view on your telescope, which to me, that's not attractive. Like I'll do a mosaic if I want to go that route, and I'll be able to zoom in a lot further and see a lot more detail because again, it will be a mosaic and not just one giant frame of the area that I'm shooting. So that's just my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. If you got one, congratulations, by all means. I think, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's an awesome camera and it takes awesome photos. I don't doubt that. But I just really question whether or not it makes sense to drop that kind of coin on a camera if you already have a 2600. So changing gears slightly, I got a really great email earlier this week. I guess it was technically over the weekend now, from a longtime listener of the show and a member of our Patreon and Discord. By the way, if you would like to join the Discord, you can go to patreon.com/the Astrocast. And we would certainly love to have you there as part of the family. But Matt writes in and he says, "Good morning, Rue. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and I hope things are going well with the adoption process." They are. Thank you for that, Matt. Things are moving right along and I'll update you guys more when there's more to say. I got one little anecdote I can tell you about, but let's get back to the email for now. That was Bane saying hi, of course. He always loves to bark in the background whenever I'm recording. But he says, "I'm a big fan of what you do. Been listening to your podcast for a long time and rely heavily on it and the info that I gather from the Discord. Love the merch, too. Nice job." Thank you, Matt. "I'm looking for advice on a computer build to dedicate to my astrophotography stuff. I'm planning to keep it strictly limited to astro-related projects, i.e. no gaming, web browsing, etc. I have a basic Lenovo laptop for that stuff. I'm currently using the laptop for Astro projects, and it's not up to the task, resulting in crashes and slow processing when I use weighted batch pre-processing or plugins like Blur Exterminator, etc. The following is what I currently use regarding astronomy gear." He says he uses PixInsight, an ASI Air, and a 2600 MC Air with what I would assume is a telescope of some sort. All right, so Matt, he attached an Excel sheet listing components that he had a friend put together for him based on minimum and recommended requirements for PixInsight. And he wanted to get my opinion on whether or not this would be basically good for a build. His budget's coming in around $3,500, and that's not including monitor, keyboard, and mouse. And he can spend a little bit more if necessary, but he wants to, keep it as reasonable as possible. So I thought this would be something really good to talk about on the show. So first of all, thank you, Matt, for taking the time to write in and ask me a question about this. And there's quite a few things that we can discuss on this. So I did write back to Matt. And I gave him my thoughts yesterday morning when I was, I had my couple of free hours on Sunday morning. I sat down because he took the time to write to me, so I wanted to make sure I write back, as I always try to do that. But the first thing that jumped out to me that Matt said is that he would be dedicating this computer to astrophotography stuff. And I really want to pause on that for a moment because I told Matt, I said, don't dedicate a computer to any one task unless it's like a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. With today's modern computers, there's really no reason whatsoever to say, all I do with that computer is process astrophotography, unless it's like a automated situation where you have a PC that you just drop files into an NAS on network attached storage, and it reads that folder and then processes those things and then spits them back out for you. Like that might be a case where you're like, okay, that's a dedicated machine. But if this is going to be set up on your desk with presumably a nice monitor to look at, there's just really no reason to keep it as a single use machine. So I don't know if Matt games a lot or, does things like that. But regardless if you're a gamer or not, there's a ton of different uses that you can use a computer for. And when I started looking at the build, the first thing that jumped out to me is like, what a shame it would be to only use this powerful of a computer for astrophotography. Because while, PixInsight is obviously a very CPU intensive program, and just the nature of our particular genre of photography means that we are going to be needing a lot of data storage. Outside of those two requirements, you really do have a lot of room to work with in terms of, specs and what have you. I'll say, without spoiling it, Matt basically has built like a very, top of the line machine, which is what you would expect for $3,500. If you're building a Windows PC and you have that kind of money to spend, then you should be able to get fairly, top of the line components for like a prosumer level computer. So with that said, I thought it'd be fun to go through each of these components and maybe kind of talk about how they can impact your workflow and, maybe what you could stretch your budget a little bit more on and maybe spend a little bit less on if you're in a similar situation and you're looking, to build a new PC predominantly for astrophotography. I'm going to say predominantly instead of dedicated, because I don't see any reason to not have a machine that's predominantly used for astrophotography if that's your, number one hobby. That just makes sense, right? But you can also use this for web browsing, YouTube watching, doing all your email. I mean, there's literally no reason not to. So again, like I said earlier, Matt is going with a pretty high-end build here. So we'll start with the understanding that for $3,500, you can build a very high-end computer. For significantly less, I would say, $1,500 or less, you can build a very capable computer that can absolutely do astrophotography processing, no problem at all. And if you're a crazy person, you can go out and just, buy a MacBook Pro and learn that way. I'm someone who actually has a MacBook Pro. I got an iPad. I've got an iPhone. I don't do really any of my Astro work on them. I understand that PixInsight's supported on the MacBook. I've installed it on the MacBook and successfully done, weighted batch pre-processing and ran different plugins, and it does work fine. But there's so many other things that I'm just a lot more comfortable doing in Windows since I've been using it since I was, 9 years old on Windows 3.0. So I'll be sticking to Windows with the budget here. But so Matt laid out all of the basically all the key components that you would need for building a computer. And when I wrote back to him, he had mentioned to me that, if I sent over affiliate links for some of the items, he'd be happy to support the show that way. And I said, I greatly appreciate it, first of all, because, every purchase through one of our affiliate links does help keep the show ad free. But for something like building a computer, I would never ask somebody to use affiliate links because you really, really do want to shop around for these components because they can vary greatly in price. And sometimes if you get say a last generation product versus the current generation product, you can get 95% of the performance of something like a processor while only maybe paying 60% of the cost. So I wouldn't do that just because I would not want to lock somebody down into saying, buy this processor through this link, because he might be able to find a processor that can do, every single bit of what that processor can do, but for half the price. So that's why I wouldn't recommend affiliate links. Now, I did tell him what I would recommend doing is going to PCPartPicker.com, and I will link to that in the show notes. I think I've mentioned it at some point before on the show, but it's probably been quite a while. So yeah, PC Part Picker is absolutely a phenomenal resource when you're building a computer. Essentially what it will do for you is let you select individual pieces of the computer. Let's say a graphics card, a motherboard, and a CPU, and it will return every vendor that is currently selling those items and which ones are at the best price, along with telling you, crucially, if they are compatible with each other or not. So a lot of times what you will see is someone will, have an idea for a new PC build that they are doing, and then they'll go to PCPartPicker.com, they'll enter in all of the components, and then perhaps it'll spit out an error and say, sorry, this RAM is DDR4 and the motherboard only supports DDR5 RAM. So please make the necessary changes, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially it's verifying that all of the components for the PC are going to work together quite well. Now, for experienced PC builders, this might not be that big of a boon, but if, like Matt, you're building your first PC, this is absolutely crucial knowledge to have, because if you don't know, you end up getting parts in the mail that you paid, potentially hundreds of dollars for, and they're not compatible with the motherboard that you have. So really important to double check compatibility when building a PC, and this just kind of automates that whole process for you. So I highly recommend it. It's a tool that I've used for decades now, and it's free and just super easy to use. You can even save profiles and save different builds. People will go on there and they will share various builds. So like say the under $1,000 gaming computer, you can, click on somebody's idea for what the best PC is for that, and it'll show you all of the components that you need to build that computer. So what specifically for an astrophotography forward computer is important? So obviously the first thing that comes to mind is PixInsight. So PixInsight being the gold standard for astrophotography processing, we want to make sure that whatever hardware we procure works very well with PixInsight and takes full advantage of whatever processing capabilities it requires. Now, most people know that PixInsight, unfortunately, doesn't natively use a GPU or graphics card to its advantage much yet. Now, I will say PixInsight 2.0 is likely right around the corner, and I would honestly be shocked if there wasn't more native GPU usage in PixInsight 2, but that remains to be seen. That's just speculation. What we do know is that several of the third-party tools, like the RC Astro plugins, such as Blur Exterminator, Star Exterminator, any denoising software that you use, these types of things are absolutely dependent on the graphics card. So while it's true that PixInsight alone is very CPU intensive, that is central processing unit, as opposed to the graphics processing unit, we don't want to forget about the GPU. You never want to forget about the GPU when you're doing a computer build. And the reason I mention this is because Matt had a lot of top end components in his PC build, and like maxed out RAM, a huge SSD, a Ryzen 9 processor. But the graphics card that he was looking at was a 3060, which is, technically 3 generations old at this point, and it's a mid-tier card. The 60 series is mid-tier. So I did recommend to him, there were a couple little changes that he could make that I would recommend. And I'd go with a 50 series card, or at minimum a 40 series card. If you could get like a 4070 graphics card, that would be a good way to go. Actually, I have a 40 and a 50 series card myself. I've got a 4070 Super in my main studio computer that I'm recording on right now. And then in the living room, we actually have a 5060 Ti. I believe it's a Ti. Ti means extra power or whatever for NVIDIA. But it's a 50 series graphics card, which is their mid end. But a 5060 it just blows the pants off of a 3060 graphics card, because, with NVIDIA, they tend to make smaller steps between generations now. But if you go from something like a 30 series card to a 50 series card in the same series, you can expect, huge benefits. So that 5060 actually kind of shocked me how well it runs everything, because our TV in the living room is capable of 120 frames per second. That was something I was really specific about buying, because we do a lot of gaming in the living room. And man, oh man, what a great graphics card that is. You can do 4K gaming and 120 frames per second on a ton of different games, and just can't recommend it enough. So 50 series graphics cards, definitely worth doing. And keep in mind, like we were talking about earlier, just because this is an astrophotography forward computer, it doesn't mean that you can't use it for other things. And even if you're not a big gamer, maybe you want to do video processing at some point. Consider Photoshop, which uses GPU. Consider any denoising software that's going to use the GPU. So there's a million reasons to get a at least decent graphics card within the last couple of generations. And I would strongly encourage that to anyone, even though as it stands today, PixInsight natively is very much a CPU driven program. Now, another thing that I feel is definitely worth mentioning, particularly when you're building a computer, is to always look at last generation's model, because sometimes the prices can be, you can find huge savings if you buy a prior generation chip that, like I alluded to earlier, can maybe do 90% of what the new chip can do for significantly less money. So just as an example, a Ryzen 7 CPU. So this is like a really good, not top of the line, but very much like a prosumer model processor. Let's just compare the Zen 4, which was the prior generation, with the Zen 5 architecture, which is the current generation. So the same card, the 7800X3D, which includes a graphics card on board, is currently going for about $365. So that's the prior generation, prosumer. You could definitely use it for astrophotography and gaming and pretty much anything else you could throw at it for $365. If you look at the newest one, which I believe is the 9900X3D, but also Ryzen 7, so pretty much, the same CPU, but a newer generation, that one is going for $454. So, nearly $100 price difference between the two. If you factor in, sales tax in America, it is over $100 difference in cost. And I personally would be more than happy with something like a Ryzen 7 7800X3D. So when you step up to the even higher end models like the Ryzen 9, that's when you can see even bigger gullies between the two. So definitely, look at the last generation models, especially if you're trying to build this on a budget. With Matt, his budget is very much high end at $3,500. But I'm telling you guys, for $1,000 to $1,500, you can build a very respectable computer for processing astrophotography, and you can also do gaming on it and all these sorts of things. So shop around and definitely look at last year's model, because a lot of times that's the best way to save a ton of money when building a computer. Now, we've already indicated that the CPU is the biggest driver of performance when we're working in PixInsight. There are definitely a couple other things that play huge roles, though, as well, and are just as important as making sure that you have a CPU that is up to the task of doing things like weighted batch preprocessing. So, the two that come to mind are going to be RAM, and that is mainly making sure that you have enough RAM. I will say, you know, 5 to 10 years ago, 16 gigabytes was kind of the gold standard for a gaming computer. If you had 16 gigabytes, you were good to go. That really has shifted in recent years to 32 gigabytes being kind of the standard. I will say, personally, I feel for astrophotography, if you were building a serious rig to handle, large projects, I would strongly advise to go with a minimum of 64 gigabytes of RAM. Especially if you do things like mosaics or multi-night sessions, having that RAM is crucial. You don't want to run into a situation where you're running out of memory and have to go to swap files and it slows everything down. You want to avoid that at all costs. On Matt's build, he is actually budgeted for 128 gigabytes of RAM. Now, normally I would say, oh, that's just overkill. 64 is more than enough. But honestly, with some of the larger projects that I've been doing lately, I've been having to break them up into smaller chunks, mainly due to memory as far as how much storage I have available. However, if I had, let's say, a 4 terabyte SSD, NVMe, M.2. God, you gotta love all these weird, weird words that they use when describing computer parts. But in any case, if you had the ideal storage and enough of it, 128 gigabytes of RAM probably wouldn't be that bad of an idea to have if you're doing, really large projects with, full frame cameras or APS-C size cameras, 48 megapixels or larger in some cases. So I'm going to say, 128 gigabytes is for kind of a top of the line machine, but I would say 64 gigabytes is really what you want to aim for. If you're running PixInsight in large scale, processing. That's not to say you can't get away with 32 gigs or even 16 gigs in some cases. I don't think 16 gigs is really enough to truly take advantage of, very large scale projects. You're going to really quickly run into walls with that. But, 32 gigs, yeah, you can get by with that. 64 gigabytes is ideal. And then 128 gigabytes is kind of the, top end. You're going to be able to handle pretty much anything that you can throw at it in terms of large scale programs. Now, NVMe storage, let's talk about that for a moment. So there's a lot of different types of storage available on the market today. So for a very, very long time, HDD, which stands for hard disk drive, was pretty much all you could get. And these are the mechanical magnetic spinning disks that we put into our computers for storage. They've pretty much remained unchanged for the last 50 years, essentially. It's the same technology. It's gotten better, and it's a little bit faster in some cases, not hugely faster. But mainly what an HDD is for in terms of astrophotography is going to be backing up your old data. One thing you're going to really quickly notice when you're building a PC, when you get to storage, you will notice different types of drives are available to you. And you're going to notice that HDDs, hard disk drives, are significantly cheaper in terms of how much they cost when compared to a similarly sized NVMe drive. So when I say NVMe drive, I'm referring to the M.2 socket, which is very common on new motherboards. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any modern motherboard that doesn't have at least two M.2 sockets. The one that Matt actually picked has 4 NVMe M.2 sockets, which is really impressive. I don't think you need to necessarily get a board that supports 4 M.2 drives, but having one that has 2, I definitely can appreciate. So what you'll want to do is make sure that you have an M.2 drive that has ample room to run your Windows install, and then B, ample room for a scratch drive that you can work off of in PixInsight and do all of your processing on. So, like, let's take a typical modern motherboard with 2 M.2 drives. What I would recommend doing would be get yourself a 512 or 1 terabyte M.2 drive for the first bay. And that's the one that you're going to install Windows on, you're going to install PixInsight on, and then you can also do all of your heavy PixInsight plugins and data that needs to, go along with it. You can kind of put all of that on your main C drive. Now, the second M.2 drive, that's the one that I would get a much larger drive. And I would say 2 terabytes to 4 terabytes if possible. Ideally 4 terabytes. And I'm telling you, when you start getting into large scale mosaics and multi-night sessions, you very quickly see a ton of space can get used by PixInsight during the weighted batch pre-processing segment of the workflow. So essentially you install Windows on that first drive, and it's kind of your workhorse, boots up all your programs and all that sort of good stuff. And then your secondary drive, that 2 to 4 terabyte drive, that's your scratch drive. So that's where all of your active projects live, any PixInsight projects, any photography that you're processing, your Lightroom install, your Photoshop projects, all this kind of stuff can live on, maybe not your Lightroom install because that's your library, but all that kind of stuff can live temporarily on that scratch drive. And really, ideally, you want to keep that as clean as possible. You want the idea is to have, at least 2 to 3 terabytes of space at all times. So no matter what size project you throw at it, you'll always have enough room to work on that project without having to move things around and delete files, etc. So once you've got those 2 drives, there's a third drive that you're going to want to have. And this is where there's a lot of flexibility in terms of which direction you want to go in. So we'll start with the more basic option, and then I'm also going to give a little bit more of an advanced option that gives you some really cool features that you can use if you chose to go that route. All right, so your first basic option for long-term storage is going to be a very large, I would say 8 terabytes at minimum, internal hard disk drive. So essentially, you're going to have usually at least 6 what are called SATA ports on your motherboard, and those allow you to connect devices and external drives to your computer. I'm sorry, I'm saying external drives, extra drives essentially to your computer. So whereas your M.2 SSD drives screw directly into your motherboard, they actually insert into a slot and then you put a little screw in. Your hard disk drive, they usually have a mounting area inside the case where you can mount drives. Depending on the type of case you get, you might have room for 2 or you might have room for 8. But these are the slower drives, but they are excellent for long time storage because they're not things that you're actively working with, but you want to hold on to. So think like I'll just give you me, for example. I don't store all of my subs from every project that I've ever done. We could debate about, pros and cons of doing that. But me personally, when I'm done with a project, I usually will save the finalized stacked file from PixInsight so I can go in and rework it. But I will not save all of the individual subs unless they are from a special dark sky trip. That kind of stuff I like to hold on to that data for, because I might want to go through and restack it and drizzle it, or maybe a new technique comes out that, can bring out more hydrogen alpha or oxygen later down the road, and I want to reprocess it. Basically, like anything that is really special to me, I want to hold on for a long time. So that is the type of stuff that I would put on this 8 terabyte storage. So think about it like this. You're processing all of your files on that 2 to 4 terabyte M.2 drive as you work through them. And then when you're complete and you're done with your image, then you can move all of that data onto the very large, cheaper drive that is the 8 terabyte internal drive. And just to give you an idea in terms of price differences, you can, like right now, you can get an 8 terabyte internal Seagate drive, which would be perfect for long-term storage, for about $140. All right, so that's 8 terabytes for $140, whereas an M.2 drive, which, mind you, is much faster, light speed faster than old spinning drives are, the one that you will use for your scratch drive, that's going to be about, from a company like Samsung, you're looking at, anywhere from $150 to $200 for a 2 terabyte SSD that is of the M.2 variety. So as you can see, you're talking like a 4-to-1 price ratio here, depending on, what you get and what brand, et cetera. I do recommend going with a more reputable brand on your drives. They tend to last longer in my experience. Western Digital, Crucial, Samsung, these are all good, well-known, trusted brands. That's not to say that you can't get a really good deal on a lesser-known company's drive. But if you look around and search, you can see that, the prices can vary quite a bit. Like, I'm looking at a King Spec. I've never heard of them, but you can get their 2 terabyte M.2 drive, which is the same speed as the Samsung one, for $124. So that's like, $50 price difference. So the point being, though, make sure that you have an M.2 drive for your scratch, your active work session, and then a very large drive, like an 8 terabyte drive, to store all of your important subs afterward that you want to hold on to for long-term storage. Now, the beauty is you don't have to just have one 8 terabyte drive. You can add more drives on as needed. And in fact, you can even get external drives if you wanted. I have 2 USB 3.0 external drives. One is 1 terabyte and one's 8 terabytes. And I use those for various storage purposes. Now, that's the kind of the budget entry point, if you will, into storage. And I told you there are some more fun options that you can go with as well, that are definitely a little bit more costly, but they give you a lot more flexibility and also a lot more peace of mind. Because this goes without saying, but if something is very important to you in terms of making sure that you hold on to that data forever, you're going to want to back it up in more than one place. And, there are a lot of different options here. Obviously, you could run multiple drives and have different copies across different drives. There's cloud storage that you can purchase and pay for monthly. I wouldn't really recommend that for a long-term storage in astrophotography because cloud storage is expensive. And then there is something called an NAS, or network attached storage. And this is really the bee's knees for what you want in terms of home storage solutions for long-term storage. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for your backups. But the caveat is, obviously, it does cost a lot more. So currently, there are a lot of very popular 2-bay and 4-bay NAS drives that you can get between $400 and $600 on Amazon. Ugreen is a very, very popular NAS manufacturer currently, and they sell 2-bay and 4-bay NAS drives. So the reason I keep saying 2-bay and 4-bay is how many drives each of those can hold. And I'm not going to get super deep into the specifics of different RAID configurations, but I tell you this because you can do a RAID configuration on a 2-bay drive where each of those drives is redundant. So in other words, if you have two 8 terabyte drives installed in that NAS, you can make it to where essentially they both have the exact same data on them. And that way, if one of those two drives ever fails, which if you keep it long enough, eventually it will, hard disk drives all fail at some point. All you need to do is remove the drive that failed, pop in a new one of equal or greater size, and then it will automatically begin to replicate the data from the good drive to the new drive. And you can see how that could be extremely beneficial for long-term storage backup and peace of mind. Now, as you move up into something like a 4-bay, you get lots of different options, and more RAID setups become available to you, where you can, have 2 drives that are exactly the same, or maybe 3 drives that are exactly the same, and then redundancy is on the 4th drive. And there's a lot of different options out there. If you want to read up on them all, I would just maybe go to ChatGPT and say, can you explain RAID and NAS to me? And there's also Reddit, of course. You can read all about network attached storage there. Another beautiful thing about a good NAS is that you can use it for a lot more than just storing things long term. A lot of people will run media servers off their NAS. So like Plex, if you've ever heard of it, it's a really awesome piece of media software that allows you to play back your TVs, movies, music. And if you have this hooked up directly to your router, remember the name is network attached storage, you can then access those files from any device on your network. You can even set up a tunnel to where you can access those files when you are off your network. So when you're out in the wild, if say somebody says, hey, could you show me that picture that you took back in 2019 of yada, yada, yada? Sure, let me jump onto my network attached storage drive and I can pull that up because I know that I have everything backed up. And another cool thing about network attached storage is a lot of them, like the Ugreen one that I was telling you about, not only does it have 4 bays for hard disk drives, but it also has 2 M.2 slots. So you can basically have it cache files for you so it can very quickly load them up. So you get the benefits of the faster drive while also having the benefits of the cheaper, bigger storage that can last for a very long time for you. So, when I was thinking about all of this and I was thinking about Matt's build and with him doing like a, top shelf purchase, I think what I would do if I had that kind of money is I would maybe cut back on a couple things. Maybe I go with 64 gigabytes of RAM. Maybe I go with a, slightly lesser motherboard that maybe has 2 M.2 drives instead of 4. And maybe I go with a Ryzen, well, maybe you stick with the Ryzen 9. But anyway, cut back on a few of the little things that maybe are a bit overkill. So with all that money that I save, I can get myself a network attached storage device, for $594 currently for this Ugreen 4-bay NAS. And I'll link this in the show notes as well if you want to check it out, the 4-bay NAS. Keep in mind, these don't come with hard drives, so you will have to install your own drives on top of that. You don't have to have 4 right off the bat to get started, so you can kind of add them as you go. And another great thing about the Ugreen is that it allows you to run open source NAS software. So you can have a lot more flexibility in terms of what software you want to run on your device. Most people like to run like a variant of Linux on their NASs. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, and you don't have to pay, monthly recurring fees. This Ford Bay NAS actually holds up to 136 terabytes, which is, a lot of storage. So I think it should be able to handle most of what you can throw at it for a very, very long time to come. So definitely check out network attached storage if you are looking for solutions for, storing a large amount of subs over a long period of time. I also, just real quick, we kind of touched on graphics cards earlier, but I just want to reiterate, even if you're not a gamer, it still makes sense to get a good graphics card, because while PixInsight is CPU bound, as we've stated many times, and doesn't really take great advantage of the graphics card yet, all the third-party plugins, like from RC Astro, so your Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, Star Exterminator, those all do amazing TensorFlow work with your GPU. And also, Photoshop, any video work that you're doing. There's a million reasons to get a good graphics card, and not too many to get a really old one that's not as powerful. So, not to mention, like I say, PixInsight 2.0 is going to be here at some point, and I'd be shocked if they didn't implement more GPU worthy task. We'll see what happens, though. That's just speculation on my part, but I think the GPU will be better used whenever PixInsight 2.0 finally does roll out. I'm not going to get too deep on power supplies, but there are just a couple of quick points I'd like to make. Buy a name brand power supply, and always buy one that can supply more than enough power for what you need. So a lot of people who are building computers for the first time, the power supply is something that, naturally, intuitively, you would think, oh, I don't need to spend too much. It's just the plug. But, it's literally what powers your entire computer. And there are a lot of cheap knockoff ones. Don't even think about going on eBay for a power supply. You want to get these from a reputable dealer. You can absolutely get one on Amazon. You can go to Best Buy and get one. If you have a Micro Center in your area, go to Micro Center. It's such a great store, but don't skimp on the power supply. It's incredibly important. It can be dangerous to have a cheap power supply. These things have literally caught fire. I would recommend checking out Linus Tech Tips if you want to learn more about power supplies. They have some really excellent information on there. There's a ton of great YouTube information out there that you can find about power supplies. But in Matt's case, with his really beefy computer, he's going with 1,000-watt Corsair. I think that's a great idea. For me, I believe I've got like a 750-watt power supply in my living room computer, and then I believe I've got a 1,000-watt one in my studio computer. Just make sure that it has more than enough to power everything that you're going to be running, including the graphics card, which is usually the most power-hungry device in your computer. PC Part Picker, again, can tell you whether or not it makes sense to use a given power supply with all of the parts that you're going for. Outside of that, let's see, we talked about RAM, we talked about hard drives and SSDs, processors. Just briefly on processors, I think a modern, and when I say modern, I mean last generation or current generation, Ryzen 7 or Ryzen 9, you should be good. I've got a Ryzen 7 personally in my machine. It's an 8-core CPU that does a great job. Matt's looking at the Ryzen 9 9950X3D. That is very much a top line CPU. I think they're going for like $700 right now. So again, that's something that I would consider maybe going, scaling back a little bit on. The X3D, that means it has built-in graphics, which is really good to have if your graphics card fails. But again, if you're not gaming, you probably don't need that. You could certainly look at a Ryzen 7 and get really great performance, but I'm not going to say it's not a good CPU. It's a great CPU, and it will crush everything that you throw at it. Just me personally, I would probably save a little bit of money on that processor and put it towards something like a network attached storage. But again, any Ryzen 7 or higher CPU that has been made within the last 4 years, let's say, should give you ample performance as long as you're covered for, RAM and storage. Make sure that you're doing everything on your M.2 drive as far as when you're processing files, and you should be good to go in that regard. Now, one thing worth mentioning too, coolers. You do have to have a cooler for your CPU. A lot of CPUs come with a cooler. I would say most people who are enthusiasts to building their own computers. They end up purchasing an aftermarket cooler to do a, ideally better job of cooling the computer than what the included one will do. There are a lot of different options here. You can go with an air cooler. You can go with water cooling. I've done both. Personally, I prefer water cooling. I think with the all-in-one units that they sell these days, it's very, very easy to install, and you really don't have to do anything to maintain it. That said, I've never built like a custom loop with, everything from scratch. That's something I wouldn't recommend to anyone who is brand new to building a PC. That's really for enthusiasts who want to make something that looks super cool and performs top shelf as far as cooling is concerned. But the reality is, even with just an included air cooler, you're usually going to be perfectly fine. That said, though, make sure with whatever CPU that you do end up purchasing that it comes with a cooler, because a lot of them don't these days. Like particularly, like I bought a Ryzen 5 for my living room computer, and it didn't come with a cooler. So just check and see. And again, PC Part Picker, excellent place to find out if you need a cooler. I would go with a 240 millimeter at a minimum, and ideally like a 360 if you're going to be doing water cooling, and that's basically the size of the radiator and how many fans it can hold. You can read up, and again, YouTube's an excellent resource for this, for looking up what are good coolers. Just make sure that you have one, though, and you can always swap that out. The beauty of building your own computer is that it can stick with you for years. It can grow with you. You can swap out parts. I mean, my current machine started back in 2015, and I don't think it has a single original part from that 2015 machine. But, after a few years, I updated the graphics card, and then I updated the CPU, and then eventually I got bored with the case, and I was like, you know what? I want a bigger case to build in because I need to do water cooling on this next CPU. And over time, you can swap out components and put in better ones. And that's really part of the joy of being a part of the PC Master Race, is that you're able to really kind of make it exactly how you want it. In cases in particular, oh man, if you've got a Micro Center in your city, go to one of them and just look at the variety of cases that we have nowadays. When I was growing up, there weren't too many cases. I mean, Cooler Master was out there putting a lot of cases out, and then I don't even know who else was out back in the day. I mean, Cooler Master was what you pretty much got when I was 20 to 25. But nowadays there are so many different options. I've got a Cooler Master case that is like a cube almost, and it gives you just a ton of space to build. Some cases have enough room in them to build two computers, like streamers do that a lot. If they're going to be streaming video games, they'll have two computers, one to stream and one to play on. So there are a lot of different options out there. I will say, just keep in mind, short of airflow, your case doesn't really have any impact on the performance of your computer. So don't feel like you need to spend $400 on a case. Like I don't think I've ever spent more than $200 on any computer case that I've bought. So don't feel like you need to go nuts there. It's really just, do you like how it looks, and does it have enough room? I guess that's worth mentioning. There are different motherboard sizes out there. There's ATX, there's micro ATX, there's mini ATX. And depending on what size motherboard you get, you'll need to make sure that your case can fit that motherboard, because some cases are super tiny and they're meant to go with, micro ATX boards. If you were putting it in the living room and you wanted to have something really discreet, you would go with that. But for us, working in a studio situation like I am, I like having a big case with a lot of room to work in, and it's got a big glass panel on the side so I can see all my, cool lights and fans and everything. And that's just great. So just keep that in mind. Case is very much a personal choice. So just whatever you go with, make sure that you like it. All right. I'm not going to get into peripherals too much. I will say, If you don't know what a mechanical keyboard is, look into it. Mechanical keyboards are the nice clicky keyboards, and they're not all super loud, though they are known for being a little bit more audible than your not mechanical keyboards. But I do want to touch on monitors briefly, because this is something that I ran by Matt when he had emailed me his list of components, because he said he wasn't including a monitor in the purchase price, which is fine. A lot of people, when they're building a new PC, they tend to not include peripherals and monitors, mice, keyboards, stuff like that as part of it, because ultimately they're building the computer, and you might already have a monitor laying around that you can use. You probably already have a keyboard that you can use, and that's kind of the idea. But I do want to say, having a large, very good monitor makes a huge difference in your experience with astrophotography processing. And what I mean by that is being able to see my finished work on a 50-inch OLED monitor. It's actually 48 inches. It's by Aorus. I bought this monitor, God, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, and it is phenomenal. I love this monitor. It's OLED, meaning I get true blacks where the pixels are just turned off. So those dark colors really shine. You get great saturation, the vividness of the colors. It's just phenomenal. And it's big. It's big enough to where I can really appreciate my work. Because remember, 99% of people that you share your photos with, they're going to be looking at it on their 4 to 5 inch phone screen, right? And that's okay. But for you, when you're processing your work, working on it actively, and then ultimately appreciating it after you're done processing it, why not do that on a large, gorgeous screen? Like, I was going through a process last week of putting together a large folder of photos for a screensaver app that I want to run on my Apple TV. So in other words, it'll flip through all of our photos for the last 10 years or whatever that me and my wife been together. And I noticed when I was going through a lot of this old photography that I have done over the years, how great some of my work was. And like, I'm not trying to boast, but like, I was really impressed with a lot of my wildlife shots and these sorts of things. And you just really can't appreciate things when you're looking at them on a tiny little phone screen. And honestly, even like a 27-inch monitor, because I got 2 of those right to the left of my big OLED monitor, and they don't come close to giving me the type of visual that I get on this 48-inch Aorus monitor. So I say all that, like, I'm not saying that everyone can afford to go out and buy a 50-inch OLED monitor. I'm not stupid. I saved up for this for, 6 months before I purchased it. But don't skimp on your monitor. Like, if you've got a budget that allows you to have a little bit of flexibility, consider maybe cutting back a little bit on some of the very top end, top of the shelf stuff, like, best CPU possible, best graphics card possible. And think about things like a really great OLED monitor or network attached storage, or even if you've got a few $100s left over, a 3D printer, which would be an excellent thing to hook up to your new computer. And believe me when I say it will pay for itself in terms of astrophotography stuff, because you can print your own Batinov mask. You can print your own shoe adapters. I mean, you can print your own autofocus pieces. You can print your own 135 cage if you want to, go with a Rokinon 135 rig. I'm sure that you've seen on Etsy where you can purchase, 3D printed shells to hold those in place. You can do all that yourself with a 3D printer. So just consider these types of things when you're building your PC, and maybe cut back on getting the very top end stuff and, get last year's model, save $200 on that item and put it towards network attached storage, because that will give you so much rewards in the future by being able to, pull up 32 terabytes worth of data from the last 10 years. Like, how awesome is that? And that graphics processor in 2 years, it's going to be the 2 generations old graphics processor. But your NAS, it's going to last for, as long as you maintain it. Your monitor can last, I've had this one for 5 years now, and it looks just as good as it did on day one. A 3D printer will pay for itself over and over again. So it's just something to think about if you've got, a little bit of a budget. Really, really, really consider the other things that you can do with that money that will directly benefit your astrophotography experience. All right, guys, you know what it is.
Social media stardust.
This week, I am going to be digging back since I was actually off for a couple of weeks, and that gives me a very large pool to choose from. And it wasn't easy because I did see a lot of really great work over the last few weeks since I've done the last show. But one image in particular really sticks out to me. The processing on it is just phenomenal. The colors are gorgeous. Man, I love the colors on this image. And you can just really tell that the author of this image took their time. They put enough data into it to where they got it to where they were happy. And man, it's a great image. So congratulations to our social media stardust winner. And that's going to be Ben this week for his M33 image. He actually posted this in our Discord on the Astro Pictures channel. He did 15 hours on M33. He did a fantastic job, and in fact, it's such a good image. I'm going to make it this week's episode show art, so everyone can have a look at it. Because I know not everybody is a member of our Discord, and that's fine. If you would like to join, feel free to go to patreon.com/the Astrocast, and you can join for as little as $5 per month to help support the show. And again, it's not something that you have to be a member of to get selected for Social Media Stardust. It's just that this image was the best one that I personally saw in the last couple of weeks. So great job on this, Ben. I absolutely love the image. I knew from the moment I saw it a couple of weeks ago that, man, that's the one. So great work on that. Keep up the good work, man. Also, just want to take a moment to thank our friends of the show and longtime sponsor of the show, Dark Dragons Astronomy. If you have a need for observatory solutions, including roll-off roof, software for said roof, flat panels, don't forget about their iOS iPad app for taking flats. It's excellent. I've been using it on my iPad as of late. Then you definitely want to talk to the guys at Dark Dragons Astronomy. So I will always have their link in the show notes. So make sure you give that a look. And hi to Rick and Jeff, great friends of the show. I'll be making it down to the observatory as soon as we get some clear skies. Can't wait to catch up with you guys and hope everything's going well. So guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Astrocast. Now, I mentioned early on in the episode that I would have a little bit of a surprise for you this week. And, I will say that AI is something that I have a lot of mixed feelings on. And a lot of them are negative, I won't lie. But sometimes something is just so awesome that you just kind of got to throw your hands up and say, you know what? That is just awesome. So a giant shout out and thank you to our admin, Tim, in the Discord, who does a great job every day for our members of the Discord. And just a big thank you, Tim. This was incredibly thoughtful. So many nice touches in there. And look, I know it's AI, guys. Frankly, I don't care. We'll be back next week with an all new episode. I hope you guys are doing wonderful. I've missed being away from the microphone. Happy to be back. And until then, as always, clear skies.
Wednesday evening, the feed goes live. Rue's voice cuts through the dark like a 135. From backyard scopes to mountain peaks, we're all tuned in, no time to sleep. Red dot finders, coma correctors gain. He breaks it down like it's simple, never pain. Comets rising, planets in the frame. Every week we chase the sky by name. Pixels glowing, hearts align, thousands of miles, one state of mind. This is the Astrocast, where the dark brings us to the light. From Florida to the UK lights, we're wide awake under the same sky. Discord pinging, never quiet, rules on the mic, the whole world's invited. This is the Astrocast, yeah, this is the Astrocast. Someone in Texas just nabbed the horse head. A guy in Chicago stacking flats till dawn. Belgium sharing deep sky gems, while Switzerland's hunting faint aurora bombs. Beginners asking which way is north. Old timers dropping wisdom back and forth. Rue laughs, you'll get it, just wait and see. Welcome to the family. 24/7, the channels never sleep. Took an imaging showcase, blowing up the feed. Memes at 3 a.m., coffee at noon. Someone's live streaming the rising moon. We're different flags, same obsession. One heartbeat in dark sky sessions. This is the Astrocast, where the dark brings us to the light. From New Zealand to the Canadian ice, we're wide awake under the same sky. No borders in the photon fight. Rules on the mic, the whole world's united. This is the Astrocast, yeah, this is the Astrocast. So here's to Rue, to the crew, to the glow of monitors burning where the wild stars grow. Wherever you are, whatever you shoot, you're never alone under that cosmic roof. Turn it up loud, let the neighbors complain. It's Wednesday again, the Astrocast on the wave. Clear skies, full hearts, see you in the Discord. The Astrocast never fades.
And I, for one, would like to welcome our new AI overlords and remind them, as a trusted podcast personality, I can be very helpful in rounding up others to toil in their underground data centers. Clear skies.